welcome once again to Feile Tilting's annual storytelling session here at the Slipway in Tilting. And it's a beautiful, I could nearly say summer's day, because we didn't have days like this in July. So it's 23, 24 degrees. So it's wind, not a cloud in the sky. I can see a kite flying up there through the window. And it's absolutely beautiful. And so we have a fine crowd here. We're going to tell a few stories, have a few laughs, maybe sing a song, who knows what will happen. And so I guess, well, my name is Maureen, Foley. I'm your host for today, and hostess. And I guess we should start off, I can start off with just a little story. I came across on the ferry back this spring. Phil and I were away, and we never got on. So I was waiting. I was staying back with the car, and he went on. So Uncle Joe Brothers, Phil's Uncle Joe, ended up coming across with me because they weren't getting on. And anyway, we waited, and we came across on the boat together. And anyone who knows about Uncle Joe knows that he's just a storehouse of stories. It's unreal. And so anyway, we talked and chatted on the ferry, and it was wonderful. And he told me something that I never knew before. And I think a lot of us heard about when Maureen was young, and she fell off the wharf over the government wharf over on the other side. Did you hear about that? Mm-hmm. And I think she was, yeah, she was only like very young, 5 or 6, I suppose. Maybe not even that old. But there was a group of kids over on the government wharf like there used to be in the summer. And I asked Rosemary if I could do this, and she said, fine, go ahead. So Uncle Lawrence and Uncle Joe were out fishing, and then there was in a rowboat, component, I suppose. And it was a nice day, and they were rowing in the harbour. And they heard someone singing out. I get goosebumps. And when they found where the voice was coming from, it was coming from the hill over on the island where we grew up. Joey Foley's house. We were living there again, I guess. And my mother was out on the hill singing out to them. And she said, there's a child in the water. There's a child in the water. And they rowed as fast as they could over to the government wharf. And Rosemary was in the water, and Uncle Lawrence reached down and pulled her out. I had heard the story before, but I never knew that my mother was involved. Yeah. And so I called Rosemary just before coming over here and asked her, told her about it. And she said, you go ahead, she said, because really, if it wasn't for your mother singing out that day, I might not be here. So it really, it struck something in me that my mother played a little part in that. And of course, the hill over there on Kelly's Island, you had a great vantage point, you could see everything that was going on all over the harbour. So, yeah, so that's one of my little stories. And so I'll pass it along to someone else now. All right. So next we have my good dear friend, Mary Burke, who we grew up next door to each other. And of course, having an older sister with 4 older brothers, it was good to escape at times. And I'd go out to Miss Stella's with the girls. And we were, we've been lifelong friends, Mark and Mary and I, all of us. And Mary can tell us, what she did when she left home as a teenager, where she went, and just as a little intro to some of her anecdotes she's going to tell us.
Hi, I left home in 1975, and I started working with C&T, Canadian National Communications, for those that don't know. And I was an operator for 21 years in Gander. So that was back in the days where there was no iPhones, there was payphones. And actually, you might think now that the life of an operator was boring, but it wasn't. There was a lot of funny things happen, so I'd like to share a couple of them with you. So one night, one of the operators had a customer call in and said, "Operator, is this the night the clocks go ahead?" And she said, "Yes. At 12 o'clock, you put your clock ahead to 1. "Oh my," he said, "you mean I gotta stay up to 12 o'clock? I usually go to bed early." Another one, a customer called in from a coin phone. So he put his money in and the operator said to him, "Go ahead." He never talked. She said, "Go ahead again." He said, "Operator, if I go ahead anymore, I'm going to be able to sleep." Another call, the operator had placed a call for a residence. A child answered. So the operator said, "Is there anybody else there with you?" And he said, "Yes, my brother is here with me." She said, "Well, get your brother to the phone." So he was gone for the longest time. He came back. He said, "Operator, I can't get him out of the crib."
Anything but dull, Mary. I'm sure he had a few chuckles at the switchboard, lots of times. And Mary's going to come back with another few towards the end. And I'm going to pass the line to a lady who can introduce herself, no problem. Needs no introduction.
This is
Maureen, I have no stories. Story.
That's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Stories are not.
Honey,
No story.
You got a story.
I got a story.
yes, come on. We're just sitting around the table. Don't worry about it.
Okay, I'm Anne Green. This is a story that happened, I would say 1969. I was working at the trading company, and Carmen Ed had just been married the following year. And so they were living over on the point where they still have their house. So, and there was no lights around the harbor. There was hardly any lights in the houses. And if there was a light in the house, they had the blinds down, so you still couldn't see if there was a light on or not. Right? So, it's the fall of the year. It's cold, it's windy, it's blowing. And everybody would get together in the evenings after supper, and like the men would come into your home and they would be telling stories. And it always ended up telling ghost stories. Mm-hmm. So by the time everyone finished the ghost stories and it was time to go to bed, you were afraid to open the door to go upstairs unless somebody had a hold of your hand. So anyway, you just put that in there. So this night I'm leaving and I'm going over to visit Carmen and Ed, and it's dark. And every time I left to go over there, I didn't walk, I ran. And the roads were much longer because when you left the house, you had to go up Mattis Height, you had to go down Mattis Height, you had to go around the hills over by Annie Keeves, along by the store. When you got to Mr. Jim Keeves' place, he had a stable on one side, a store on another side, so you had to go in, go around it. Then you got by Alan Keeves, and then you started thinking, oh, I gotta go by Sis Poor, this old house, a spooky house in the lane. So by the time you got around there, I mean, it took quite a walk to get over. So this night I decided, well, I'm going over to Carm's, and I'm running and get past Jim Keeves, and then I could hear footsteps coming behind me, and I'm saying, oh, I wonder who that is. So I got by Sis Duff's, Sis Poor's lane, and I don't know what came over me, but I had on this white raglan, this trench coat. So I stood on the side of the road, and I just stood there. And I waited, and I could hear footsteps coming up, and they stopped. And I said, oh my, and they went back. So I did not move. And the footsteps came farther up the next time. And it went back again. I'm saying, oh my God. So the next time, yes, the pastor, he came on up, he said, good night. I still never said a word. So I went, after he went on, I knew who it was. It was Mr. Alan Tobin, Kate Tobin's father, who lived over by Jack Hurley's. So I went on over to Carm's and Ed's, and when I got there, I said, Carm, you wouldn't believe what I did tonight. And she said, what? And I told her, she said, oh my God, you didn't do that. I said, I did. So anyway, the next morning I got up and I went to the trading company to work. And just before noon, in comes Mr. Tobin, Alan Tobin. So Joe Brothers and Uncle Ferd Burke was there. And they were just chatting and chatting away. Next thing, Alan says, oh, I saw something last night. and I stood there and my ears perked up and I said, oh my God. So he goes to say that, well, you know, they were always talking about ghosts. Well, last night it was there. And they said, what? And they said, well, he said, I could see this lady, she was standing there and her coat was blowing in the wind. And he said, I didn't really want to pass by because I didn't. He said, but after a couple of times, he said, that's it. And I went by and I said, good night. Not a sound. So I'm standing and I'm saying, oh my God. So after he left, the lunchtime came. I said, oh, Carm. And I ran to Carm's for lunch and I said, Carm, you won't believe it. And I said, he came over to the store. Alan came over and he told about seeing the ghost. And she said, well, you better not say a word. And all these years, I never told anyone. Those people are gone, except for Kate. She's still in Edenville, right? So, Kate, I'm sorry I scared your father. But until now, I've never really told that, except Carmen say, remember when? I said, yeah, I remember well. But that's my story.
You were a ghost for a night.
I was a ghost for a night.
Excellent.
And I was more scared of ghosts than probably anybody.
Well, I'm Ann's sister, and I'm going to finish off that story. Because later on, a few years after, Mr. Tobin died of a heart attack. And I phoned her. I phoned her and I said, Ann, guess who died today? And it was Mr. Tobin. I said, what, he had a heart attack? And she said, oh my goodness, Karen, oh my God, what if that had to happen? I said, something had to happen that night. I said, well, you think you're looking scared.
That's a late heart.
Maybe you never ever forgot.
I'm Ed Healy. I usually tell lies, but this evening I got nothing but the truth. So And we were talking about Harry earlier, Harry Keenan. He was a nice man. God rest him. And I remember he was staying with Mrs. Mary Ellen and Mr. Philip Foley. I was down to Ron and Roseburg's at the head of the shop. Well, I thought I was going to be a hunter. I never came to anything after, but I ordered a 12 gauge from Steers. I think Mr. Ron ordered it from Steers. So this day, the 12 gauge arrived. It was a Savage, I can remember. The 12 gauge arrived, a Savage 12 gauge. It was bold extra, nothing fancy. It was. Anyway, I said to Harry, the weekend I'm going to go down to Oliver's Cove and try her, see what's it like. And anyway, he said, all right, come down with you. So the two of us went up the road and out to Oliver's Cove and fired off a few shells into the water. And somebody was in the garden down there, I can't remember who it was, but sung out to Harry, come over, he said, I got a cabbage for Mrs. Mary Ellen you can bring down for Sunday dinner. Very good. So we're coming back now. Harry got a cabbage and I got 12 cats. So we come in rest to Mr. Jim Green's house. I never met him before. And he's sitting on the front step having a smoke right outside. And he said, well, boys, you got a shot? We didn't know what to say. We walked on down the road. Eh? Well, that was the first time I think I spoke that I met Mr. Jim Green. I got to know him much better after. But he was a witty man. A lot of those fellows were very witty, and I think it helped them a lot in hard times. You know, the fellows say something dry and witty about what was going on. I was telling today about what Gerard said to me. That I thought that was a good one. Yeah. And
Tell us.
what was the other one? I can't remember the other one I had in my mind. Now it's gone.
Not
That's
one
all
of
right.
Gerard.
No, I just told him that one before we got the mic. You want to tell it again?
Yes.
Sorry, Mike. Anyway. Anyway, we wanted to upgrade our electricity. We had 15 amps like everybody, and we wanted however many more you're supposed to have. And you want a hot water tank and a baseboard heaters and all the rest of it. So Gerard Dwyer come up to the house, he being an electrician. Now I was like most fellows at that time in the late 60s, early 70s, we did our own wiring because it was only 15 amps and we figured it couldn't hurt it, right? So anyway, I had it done the best I knew. I had a boot, but anyway, Gerard comes up and he starts going over all the wiring I had done. Everything he looks at, he's shaking his head and tut tut, and oh my, oh my. And anyway, he keeps going and he keeps going and he wires the whole place. And when he's finished, he's signing off and he signs his name on the little sticker and he's putting it onto the panel, the breaker box. And he says, Eddie boy, he says, I'll do a deal with you. You don't wire houses and I won't teach French. And we shook hands on it. Now, I don't know if Gerard ever taught French, but I did fiddle with the electricity and after that, but it was never done right. Can't tell that. Anyway, here's Elaine now. You Elaine?
I
Beat Mike.
I don't really have a story to tell because, I don't know, my memory's failing me these days, I think. But I do have one in one of the tea magazines that I wrote back in 2011. And as I usually, every year, pay a little tribute to Clara, who I have said before was Irish through and through, and would, I'm sure she's here in spirit if there's such a thing. And she probably knows what's going on. But maybe not, because if she did, she'd be speaking up somehow and letting us know. Anyway, this is one I did, I call it Young Heroes. And I'm just going to read it, I'm not going to tell it, if that's okay.
Yes.
When growing up in Tilting in the 50s, most homes were lit by a kerosene lamp. Lighting this lamp was a feat for adults only. One evening in the fall of 1956, Mom and Dad, Stella and Tom Burke, went to church to make the mission, and it was a session for adults only. All the children in our family, Lambert 11, Kay 9, Ray 7, me, Elaine 5, Pauline, who was just a few months old, we were all left in the care of Clara, who was the oldest, and she was 12. By today's standards, that would probably be classified as child neglect. However, that was the norm in those days, as babysitters were not in vogue. Mom left a small lamp on the kitchen table for Clara to light when it got dark, with instructions to leave the Aladdin lamp to be lit when they got home. The smaller lamp must have been directly underneath the Aladdin lamp, that was the consensus after the fact, and the heat from it must have cracked the bottom of the Aladdin lamp and caused it to break, spilling kerosene onto the smaller lamp, causing a fire. Pauline was sleeping upstairs, baby. Clara had the maturity and the presence of mind to realize the danger and ran to get her. She rushed back downstairs, only to discover the curtains afire, and while holding Pauline, she pulled the burning curtains from the window. Pieces of ash were later found in Pauline's blanket. My brother Lambert, who was 11 at the time, he grabbed a rag mat from the floor and he beat the flames out on the table. Between the two of them, they quickly put out the fire. While this was going on, Kay, who was 9, ran into the room, we used to call it, and closed the door. But she quickly returned when she realized she was missing the excitement. I relate the facts from my memory and from hearing the story being told over the years. One thing I do remember about it was the water, the tide used to come right in by our house and was very, very high. But I remember my Aunt Gertie's husband, Bill Dwyer, crossing through the water wearing his thigh rubbers. And then he went to the church to get Mom and Dad. And when Mom saw his wet boots, her first thought was that Ray, who spent hours playing in the cold, had drowned. So one can only imagine her relief when she found out it was a fire and everyone was safe with minimum damage to her home. And I guess by today's definition of heroes, Clara and Lambert would be classified as such. And I'm sure in Mom's and Dad's eyes they were heroes. They just didn't receive any medals. Maybe they were wearing their miraculous medals.
Ah, yeah, good job.
My name's Noel Mount. I was born on the west coast of Ireland, and I've always, I guess, been somewhat of an adventurer. The fact that I'm in Fogo Island is part of this adventure. I left Ireland about 1982, pressured out of the country by all sorts of things that were going wrong in the north where I was working. I was running in a factory there. But the adventure was what I was looking for, and I came to Canada, became a Canadian, and then a few years later went over the border to America, where I met Claudia, got married, started my own business. But I've still always looked for adventure. I mean, it's like getting out and doing something in the countryside and seeing animals and people and whatever. And I had this old Volkswagen bus. You know the ones, everybody's had one. They have a pop top and you can sleep in them and you can, you've got one? You've
I
got
had one.
Yeah. Mine was a real great one. I had one in 4-wheel drive, so I managed to get to Labrador. And I managed to get to, all sorts of places. But one day I decided that I was going to go and camp in the middle of a frozen pond in the middle of the lake in Maine, in a place called Greenville. The lake is like a 42-mile long lake. And of course it was winter, and people had ice fished on it, so I decided I'd drive into the middle of the lake and pop the top on this van and, do what kids do. At least that's what I do. I brought the dogs with me for company, and I got out into the middle of the lake and the stars were shining, and it was a beautiful evening, so I spread my sleeping bag out, and I left the dogs outside to do what they had to do before I, bedded down for the night. I undressed, and having a good sleeping bag is always a good thing when you're sleeping on a frozen lake. So I'd undressed completely, and I was sort of like stark naked when I decided I would just get out and take a leak on the ice, what I could do. And I closed the door of the bus, and one of the dogs leaned on it, and it had electric locks.
Oh!
And they were in there, and I was out there with not even shoes on. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And the first thing, of course, that went through my mind was like the poor dogs. And the second thing, of course, was,
Or me.
poor me. So that's my little nonsense story.
So what happened?
I was
What happened?
When I got to Fogo Island, that's what happened.
But you weren't naked when you came here.
I am underneath it.
No, you always leave us wanting more. Okay, what about anyone else? Edna, any of the Brine women?
Yeah,
And then Bonnie? Oh, the mic. Introduce yourself.
when Ann was telling me about the ghost story, time she was a ghost, it reminded me of the time that Val and Waltz Bryan were coming home from around shore. They were about 15 or 16, of course, in those days. Very dark, and and it was All Souls Eve. So they heard they were coming along by Keys. So anyway, they decided they heard two women coming behind them. So when they got to Jeff Force, anyone remember Jeff Force house was short of the slugs under there. So they got in behind Jeff Force house. And the two women picked up a picket off the fence roughed around. And when the two women got in front of Jeff Force house, they pulled the picket down over the Jeff Force house. And it was Mrs. Philomena and Mrs. Dale. And they were coming home from church. Remember, it was All Souls Night. They couldn't, oh Lord, have mercy on their souls. So they waited, and of course they walked home shortly after. So the next day, of course, we lived next door to Mrs. Philomena, and Val was out there. She said, oh, we got a terrible fright last night. She related the story. And then in the left, she said, that was you, wasn't it? But they really was frightened.
Oh, I can imagine.
Well, Hilda? Jim.
Okay, this way now. See, all kinds of badness used to happen years ago. We talk about the kids nowadays. Well, I do. Bonnie, have you got anything to share with us?
Well, hi, I'm Bonnie. When I first arrived in Tilting, I was Bonnie Collins, and I've had a couple of names since then. Anyway, I came to Tilting in 1973, or 72, 73, that winter. I had landed in Fogo Island, and was staying over in Bard Islands. But one of the great trips across the Sound from Carmenville, we got stuck in the ice, and so I met some other voyagers, one of whom was Mercedes Bryan. So we became friends. She was at the time living here in Tilting with her mother and her brother. And so she said, well, come on over and visit when you can. Well, I didn't have a car, and it was hard for me to get around the island, but I finally, after a couple of weeks, found somebody to give me a ride as far as Tilting, and left me off on this side of Tilting. And I asked somebody, where did Mercedes Ryan live, and they pointed to the other side. Now this was in probably January, maybe February. It was a cold time when there was ice everywhere. So I looked at the situation, the geography of the situation. So here I was on this side, and I had to get to that side, and there was this rock in between. So I thought to myself, well, just go the shortest way. Now I'm from California, so what do I know about ice? Nothing whatsoever. Well, I was probably not as clueless as Noel was, but anyway. I had my clothes on. So anyway, I don't know the point at which I actually left the land here, but it was somewhere close by, heading over to where the Coots lived at the time, the Rock, and the ice was shifting because, of course, this is the narrowest part of the harbor, and so it's probably, it's not the most stable place. So there I was. I just remember I got to be jumping from one piece of ice to another, and it was trying to go as fast as I could because things were getting pretty bad. Now still don't know to this day who saw this happen, but I did make it across just barely to the other side, and I was, I felt relieved. But it took me maybe a couple of years to understand how truly foolish I was. Anyway, I made it across, so I got to visit with Mercedes and her mother and so forth, and that's the house that I'm living in now. And I remember Mrs. Tate sitting in a rocking chair, and knitting and so forth. And also she was saving her son's little bits of the tobacco that were left over when he finished his cigarettes. She had a little tin, and she would take whatever, the stubs of his cigarettes and save them up so that he could then roll them
Oh,
again.
Sounds
Yeah, it's very long. And so, anyway, I did survive the ice that time, but it was close, and I was totally clueless. I was just trying to think of some other stories. They're really stories about how foolish I've been. And I probably
Those are the
share
best
most of those. But I
Those are
do,
the
I
best
just,
ones.
yeah, they're wonderful times to remember about Mr. Bernard Cluett, who remained after I left. I came in 72 really, and I left in 74. And he remained a dear friend for years afterwards. In fact, I have a large box full of the letters that he wrote. The most beautiful handwriting and very articulate letters written in exactly the way he spoke, which you can imagine if you knew him. Great times. And I was so impressed, for example, by the fact that he and others are so literate, beautiful writers and speakers. And he told me that he left school when like grade 3 because he didn't like the way the teachers dealt with his sister, I think. She misbehaved and they put her hand on the hot stove or something like that. And, these horror stories of growing up where, in a very isolated place where the teachers were very young people who didn't know what they were doing either and so forth. But anyway, I was really impressed by that and very fond of him and other people I got to know. Dominic and Chris Brothers were extremely important to my sanity. I was really isolated here. I was a graduate student who I was trying to come up with a doctoral thesis, and I was mostly just really lost and shy and afraid of that I would do the wrong thing, etc., etc. So I found haven in Chris and Dominic's house, where I was fed very well and learned about homebrewed beer and so forth, which was quite good. Heard Dominic's stories and his powerful stories about his near survival on the ice, and I think it was at that point I realized that I had been taking a big risk. So that's all I want to share right now. Thanks so much.
Thank you.